Welcome to the Newburyport Literary Festival. We hope you've enjoyed this morning's events. We've got lots more happening right up till 8 o'clock this evening. Be sure to check the complete schedule on the Newburyport Literary Festival website. My name is Alfred Nicole, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's poetry event. We are using Zoom webinar. For that reason, because you can see us, but we cannot see you, we encourage you to use the chat window throughout the event. That lets us know that you're out there. And we find out that there are people out there from Amsterdam and things like that. It's great. An important note before we get started, our local bookshops need your support now, as always, and perhaps more than always. I will post links in the chat session to two of our festival partners, Jabberwocky Bookshop in Newburyport and the Bookshop of Beverly Farms. We encourage you to purchase books from them unless, of course, you have another favorite independent bookseller you'd like to support. On screen with me is Midge Goldberg, whom you may have heard read earlier today. And if you did, you're one of the lucky ones. I've asked Midge to introduce our first reader because Midge has written and published appreciative commentary on Susan Desola's poetry. I'm going to turn off my video and leave you with Midge, and I'll see you halfway through the program.
Thanks, Alfred. Yeah, as Alfred said, I wrote a review of Susan's book, Frozen Charlotte, that appeared in the Hopkins Review, so I was really pleased to be asked to introduce her today. The title of the reading, the theme when you signed up, Wary of Destruction, comes from a line of poetry by Robert Crawford, who you'll be hearing from later on. I'm wary of destruction just for fun. These poets don't blow things up just for the fun of it, but they also don't avoid or ignore destruction. Rather, Susan Desola walks right up to it, examines it closely, and decides when to include it and why. And she writes about destruction in such a whirl of color, sound, and imagination that you barely notice you're being led to deeper truths. One of the poems in her collection, The Tulips, perfectly exemplifies the poet's contemplation of destruction. Tulips are beautiful, but ephemeral. In this iambic pentameter blank verse ode, the flowers are brought home from a farmer's market and displayed on a vase on a table. Sola captures their almost ridiculous beauty, describing them as great goblets, plush concavities, and blousy lipstick interlocutors. Her alliterative lines are a pleasure to the ear and a tribute to her imagination, a Dutch-bobbed, slouching flapper of a flower, so modernist and sleek, a silhouette, a flower a cartoonist might invent. Even though the cut flowers are technically dead, we don't think of them that way. What had this red exuberance to do with death? But once all the petals have fallen to the table, she reveals what's left. Slim green stalks with small white crowns stand bare, abstract. Without destruction, the petals falling away, this underlying, longer-lasting beauty would never be revealed. In another of the poems from the collection, Preserved Things, which is a poem with echoes of Hopkins and Whitman, she writes, I sing now of preserved things, of whorls and wood and table rings, calico corn, gold and red, like relic teeth in an ancient head. The sounds and the words are playful and engaging. Who doesn't have a jar of pearl onions in the back of the refrigerator and a bag of old peas in the freezer? She writes, to this, add things from the fridge, surviving on their Arctic ridge, a jar of pearl onions on a shelf, a wishbone drying on a sill. Probably it lies there still. Let us add the things that freeze, an ice age of meat and peas. But what's really being shown here? The small things that cannot be destroyed, things that outlast not only everything around them in the fridge, but most likely us as well. In the end, the items are presented as changeless, outside flow, the answer to a riddle I wished not to know. Perhaps what we wish not to know is that we too will be outlasted. And finally, in the poem An Agony of Silk, Desola introduces us to an employee in a lingerie shop who herself seems destroyed. Her voice, it seemed, had licked 1,000 ashtrays, spat out 1,000 butts. A woman whose life was lived entirely on a bed. We are shown her future, a bleak trajectory, tragic and pitiless, of older women broadening in the beam. And we are ready to pigeonhole her as trapped in a dead-end life. But Desola sees something else. The woman is much more. She understands the women here in town, where life is fat. Ensconced here, day by day, she sees what is. So she wraps the neat conciliatory boxes and ties them up with silken black lace bows. What we could so easily dismiss by a quick glance is not, after all, so easily destroyed. Please join me in welcoming Susan Desola. And I'm going to metaphorically hand the mic to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here today. This is just great. I want to thank you for that introduction, and I want to thank everybody who organized the festival for making it possible. I'm here from Amsterdam, and it will soon be evening here, and I'm very thrilled to be reading with Robert Crawford. I'll be reading from my collection, Frozen Charlotte, and it was published by Able Muse Press, and it was also recently published in a very beautiful hardback edition. And I want to thank my publisher, Alex Peppel at Able Muse Press. And I would like to think that I'm actually in coastal Newburyport. So the first poem I shall read is about the sea. Bowl of sea glass. Bottles tossed in drunkenness from land, washed to shore as fragments beveled chips. The sea batters them as if a rough sculptor and not the conductor of impeccable measures calcified in urchins' jaws, the crystal rods of sponges, byssal threads of mussels. The sea's soft fingers of anemone know to open in the dark. Parchment worms glow, and ghost crabs flitter round the shoals. Pearls form rounds from grit, and razorbacks cut ovoid troughs. Is all shaped by the sea to sound its rhythms through precise machines? No, the sea is a hammer, a rough refiner, its fistful of pieces from a bottle thrown. The sea lifts, pounds the glass, insists on randomness. I am myself a bit of a rough sculptor, but nothing is more difficult than capturing the likeness of a loved one. In this case, sculpting the likeness of my husband. This poem is titled Portrait Bust. I layer clay and hope he'll coalesce, begin to plane his jaw and hone his cheek, his heavy brow, his nose's prow, distress, his ear is wrong, I slice it off. I see a flaw, pry out his eye, the hole not right. Relief to stroke his cheek or flatten down odd locks of hair, but still not him, too slight and mean. It seems he now returns my frown. A man, and yet not mine this portrait bust. He stares out coolly from Swiss mountain mud. I see just why it's failed, and fail it must. This blend of burial earth and stony blood. I love the living head, the breathing face. I fear the sculpture that would take his place. I'm fascinated by animals, and I have a section of animal poems in my book. Here are two short ones. Mouse time. They say all creatures' hearts may last an equal number of beats. 1 billion for the whale, as for the mouse, an equal measure to be drawn. And so the whale's slumberous drum for decades dilates water rings, and so the mouse, from dawn to dawn, spins whole seasons on a wheel. The scrap of mammal sings a rushed song of hurrying mouse. The too long tail marks its trail, staccato zeal, a countdown of time in starts. This next poem is a response to Louise Bogan's variation on a sentence, which is itself a response to Henry David Thoreau's observation here in Massachusetts that few animals are blue. Bluish animals. Bluish monkeys, one small shrew, the cat they call the Russian blue, the purebred rat and peacocks too. Yes, bluish on the land are few. But bluebird is defined by blue and countless sorts that fly or flew. The largest animal's the whale. His head is blue and so's his tail. So many fish are blue of scale. Being confined to air or sea, these challenge visibility, as though for God especially. For camouflage may make us blind to earthly elements confined, while blue is heaven's private mind. For sea and sky have no real hue, it's like they borrow shining through. Although they may be hard to view, a wealth of animals are blue. And I realize that writing about tulips is also entering a literary conversation. But since I do live in the Netherlands, I feel like I had to write a tulip poem, which Midge so kindly cited part of. The tulips. We bought them in a farmer's field, so plump and red, great goblets, plush concavities, which made of content and irrelevancy. For days, we took delight in their post-mortem magic. What had this red exuberance to do with death? They anchored down the table, held center stage, just like an aria, a swelling note we held against the odds. But now they start to fall apart, and see, they deconstruct so cleanly. Diving petals reveal a pattern on the inner corner, a three-point wedge of aubergine black, capped by arching yellow bands, a stylized print of itself in little, vector to the ribbed red flank which had barely aged. The tiny tulip print anticipates its slide to symbol. The sleekly flattened violet pistils spill out scarcely any powder. Slim green stalks with small white crowns stand bare, abstract, a Dutch bob slouching flapper of a flower, so modernist and sleek, a silhouette, a flower a cartoonist might invent. I sweep the petals up in great big bunches, the dustbin blazing. It had never looked better. But it's become almost a game. The petals fall at random, yet they seem to fall in answer to our conversation, plunging at key words, thumping downward during our significant pauses, heard in silences. Lousy lipsticked interlocutors, drunken smacks, and dried out goodbye kisses. Living here in the Netherlands also has a yet darker side. The Second World War and the Holocaust are much more immediate. This poem was written about the National Holocaust Memorial Day, marking the liberation of Auschwitz. One time I attended and I witnessed a sign language interpreter translating the ceremony for a deaf man. Wertheim Park, Amsterdam. The woman rubbed her hands and stamped her feet. We were gathered in winter in Wertheim Park. You forgot your gloves, I said in sympathy. She gestured to her purse and muttered, work. We'd come for the annual memorial march. She stood in the shelter of an oak, her back to the stage, apart from the crowds that filled the level park. I wondered as I saw a man about her age. Facing her, rocking heels, misting breath, his quite large ears rimmed pink with cold. Her hands began to move. I saw he was deaf. She signed the things the mayor and the rabbi said. Like frozen birds, her hands rose up and fell. Her black brows frowned, and her face seemed to dance. Her mouth made O's, as if too shocked to tell. Words flew through her eyes and fluttering hands. I watched him watching her in mute oration, his hands in pockets, his mind tracks in silence back 67 years to liberation, the buried history of his lost parents. The rabbi's prayers began to remember them, and all the numberless, nameless dead, and all the known too many to name. So he sang a litany of camps instead. Interlaced in the Hebrew melody, Auschwitz, Belzec, and Theresienstadt, Westerbork, Dachau, Drancy, Treblinka. How did she sign those names? What signs for that? All I recall is her mouth made an O, her hard brows as the general hell repeated. All the names the same. O, 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 and O. Auschwitz, Belzec, and Theresienstadt. Westerbork, Drancy, Treblinka, Dachau. A crescendo of unspecified despair. Could she speak the names with signs? Then how? Still, her tireless hands cut the frozen air. The next poem also touches on the Second World War, but from an American perspective. My mother was a war widow whose first husband died in action just a few days before the war's end. One of the uncanny spaces of childhood for me was her cedar closet. She's hung the suits of meaty tweed and twill, aridified furs and heavy shearling coats, and set in boxes scarves and gartered stockings. Plummy satins with acrylic buttons carved into flowers, her widow's wedding suit in watered lavender. She's kept the first seed-pearled wedding gown concealed. Repelled by a stole of baby foxes, mouth to tail to claw-like clasp, I stroke the velvet hats with veils and pins and suede platform pumps. I try her rhinestone-studded party shoes and lift her slips in tints of angel skin, her stacks of gloves in suede and calf and kid, her handkerchiefs initialed NLP, obsolete these 70 years. He climbed a mine-sown hill to save a soldier, a trap. Blown up, he set off more while rolling down. There wasn't very much of him left. She's kept for me the graduated pearls, too small for my taste, and a dress of painted silk that somehow fits, as does the pleated skirt, an ochre Pringle sweater set. Forgotten, the tarnished powder compacts, random lipsticks, and yellowed hankies slipped in every clutch, in leather bags with heavy metal clasps that snapped shut tight like the purse of her lips. Her clothes, the only story that she tells. A puff of dust drifts down the cedar walls. Now, I think we could probably now use a comic interlude. So I'm going to read a few short comic poems. Do you remember flying in airplanes? I feel very nostalgic about airplanes right now and all the maps inside the magazines with all the routes of all the airplanes. British Airways. In the pocket of a British Air armchair, an in-flight magazine in flight flaps in its centerfold a cartography of routes, routed in red, an empire of aeroplanes. The arcs seem phonic, as Pisa leads to Tunis, Newquay to Cork, and Killarney can Kilkenny. Jersey mimics Guernsey, Glasgow ends as Carlow, and Nairobi swallows Cairo. Not imperial, yet imperial, the panoply of red lines like spokes of a colored umbrella, spreading out from London's nub, covering and eclipsing British mails, British rails, cleaving happy ozone trails. There's something intrinsically comic about cheese, and too few cheese poems. Thoughts on cheese. A standing block of cheese is milk not at its ease. Seen through a microscope, it's writhing with false hope and swarming with bacilli that scurry willy-nilly. It seems like this must be the milk's finality, but is in fact a plea for immortality. An epigram. Post-lapsarian giraffe. Although blessed in being tall, they are doomed at birth to fall. Okay, the comic interlude is over. This poem was originally titled Spooning, but I like to think it's also about the fall, and I like to think that it's maybe about the first evening that Eve and Adam spent outside the garden. Eve sleeps. Hand rests on hip or curves to breast, chest to back, his strong legs pressed to make a chair of flesh for me. Adjudications of the breath, Adam's apple near my head, were stacked for storage in this bed, as sleep suspends us near death. Twins in the dark, we knit a seam, from toe to crown, a tensile wire. Our eyes roll blind, they roll desire. Locked in body, branched to dream, we fall into this darker space. Each cannot see the other's face. And thinking of fallenness, I'm now going to read the title poem of my book, Frozen Charlotte, which is not a dessert, and I'm very glad it didn't end up in the cookery section, but a 19th century doll, which became associated with a ballad tradition about a young woman who froze to death on her way to a ball. And this ballad tradition resonated with, I think, earlier ideas of mortality and the harsh reality of North American winters. Frozen Charlotte. I am a doll of ivory bisque. I was a girl, but was too bold. To preen in silks, I dared to risk the open sleigh. I don't grow old. A girl of flesh who died of cold. I froze while riding to the ball to end in ice and snowy pearls. I thawed in kilns a molded doll, a pocket vanitas for girls. My cheeks are flushed. I died of cold. I float now in a child's bath. My little mistress pushes me from rim to rim or to her mouth. They've taken all my finery. A doll's not flesh. I don't get cold. I'm safe for play, no moving parts. My price is small. I'm bought and sold. I fortify their frozen hearts. I'm getting warmer now. It's told on mountain roads. I died of cold. This is a riddle poem a bit. I'd like you to think about a matchstick, but there might be other creatures in it. The matchstick man takes great leaps on his one pale leg, bounds with relish, saltates with snap, florid, russet-haired, bulb like a baster, slubbed with sulfur. He smiles dithyrambs, ardent as a dog, ecstatic to see me. Suddenly he leaps, spins to a headstand, grovels along the emery, a long, intense nuzzle of the head until it flicks into flame, his browning glory, a forest fire of one with our rough places. I'm going to read two-part song, which Midge also mentioned in her kind introduction, and it is kind of a song. Preserved things. Of most things come and gone, remains little song. The milk got drunk, the egg got fried, the bleached colors of the Polaroid lied. Moth wings break into crumbs. Parts don't add up to sums. Yes, most things will slip and slide, eroding in the great elide. I sing now of preserved things, of whorls in wood and table rings, calico corn, gold and red, like relic teeth in an ancient head, ageless pussy willows in a glass, far from their lost river pass. An arrangement, too, of white moonwort pods, stretched tight like the papery skin of a drum, forgetful where they traveled from. Yes, all these things make a mighty sum. To this add things from the fridge, surviving on their Arctic ridge, a jar of pearl onions on a shelf, a wishbone drying on the sill. Probably it lies there still. Let us add the things that freeze, an ice age of meat and peas. Yes, I sing a song of things preserved, the parched, the pickled, dried, conserved, inert but alive, unlike me, they disdain to grow, not dead but changeless, outside flow. The answer to a riddle I wished not to know. Things thrown away. To live is to scatter, even things that matter, to send on its way that which would stay. I am mighty, lift crates, push boxes, flatten gates, jettison the jetsam, float away the flotsam. It's an art to lose it, Bishop said. All I want is in my head. Let photos curl, let knits unpearl. A collage I made too long unseen. Its cuttings slot to magazines. The codfish from the freezer flies, swims back to streams. The cat, the dog, both long dead. Granny too and what she said. They leave a little heap of stones. All may join in general decay. Rosebuds gathered where they may. The clothes may soon fall to tatters. The roof crush a sinking wall. I'd like to leave without a trace. Dissolve the lines that line my face. Live lightly on the dropping earth. Grow all compact and white and spare, a cube of nothing small and rare. If I squeeze it small, it all fits there. A rolling die in rarefied air. And I see that I have 2 minutes left, if I'm counting correctly. And I'm going to conclude with 2 little poems. One is about a subject not written about enough, I think, and that's the male nude. Blind, she considers her lover. And it's based on the conceit, I should say, of the 6 blind men, blind Indians, who try to make sense of an elephant. 6 blind Indians felt the elephant and made of it 6 entities. So is my love, for in the dark, where half a marriage is spent, you are many. First, there is that silky fringe of frontward falling hair. You are a horse, fetchingly groomed. You shake your head, and your forelock falls forward, steed. Then there are your collarbones, which roll, like the bone of shells rolled by water, collected in pebbles and driftwood and weed. You are shells on a beach, resting in kelp hollows. Then the smooth skin of your back and chest, it sings with softness. You are bolts and drapes of some rich fabric, organic weave of silk to velvet. Yes, you are a draper's treasure. Lower, there is warmth and coils, springs, countless corkscrews of millimeter breadth. I would guess a fine steel wool, its gauge innumerable zeros. The legs are sturdy, lightly forested. Surely they are lichened logs. Yet, between the moss and the steel, the strangest skin, unlike any other, stretched, nerve-rich, another color. Even if I were a blind Indian, I'd know it. It is itself. It is not like another. And as the coda to my reading, I want to just end on a very positive note, and that is called The Promise. We'll sail a small boat on the lake, and I will steer so you may sit. When 50 years trail in our wake, we'll sail a small boat on the lake. The wave of time about to break shall fill the vessel we two fit. We'll sail a small boat on the lake, and I will steer so you may sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for a lovely reading, for sheer musicality. I mean, it's been a feast for the ears. That poem of yours about the blue animals read in your voice, that's right up at the top when it comes to music in language.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us from Amsterdam, no less. Okay, well, I'll introduce our next poet now. Next poet is my good friend, Bob Crawford, whom I will introduce, though Midge might have done a passable job, seeing as Bob is her husband. But I'm going to do it honest. Robert W. Crawford's 2 books of poetry, The Empty Chair, winner of the 2011 Richard Wilbur Award, and an earlier volume, Too Much Explanation Can Ruin a Man, have established him in the first rank of formalist poets. But his contributions to the art of poetry go beyond his own remarkable verse. Crawford serves as director of Frost Farm Poetry in Derry, New Hampshire, which includes the Hyla Brook Reading Series, the Frost Farm Poetry Conference, and the Frost Farm Poetry Prize. Bob Crawford is an irreplaceable member of the poetry community. Or not. In a poem based on the infinite universe theory, Crawford meets his double in a bar called Maury's, located somewhere in Orion's belt. The odds of this happening may appear slim, but as Crawford writes, it's not a question of if, but when. All possibilities exist in one of the infinite universes that constitute the multiverse. Crawford has a gift for coupling cutting-edge science with traditionalist poetry. It's a minor miracle to make such weird science accessible in the 14 metric lines of a sonnet. But here, as always, Crawford's verse is remarkable for its clarity. An interest in cosmology is in keeping with the broader vision of Crawford's poetry. If there are heroes to be found in Crawford's poems, and they are very few, they are not the kind who find universal fixes for the problems of society. They are people wise enough to sense that the world is a lot bigger than any one individual. In a poem titled A Passenger, a man walks calmly on the deck of a ferry during the Second World War, unaware that an underwater missile is approaching the ferry's bow. Crawford does not speak of the man with pity. He sees him as every man, each of us, lucky not to know when our hour approaches, free for the moment to appreciate the beauty of the haloed moon in the sky. The persona of another poem, Algiers, 1957, is less happy and more aware of his helplessness to change the course of history. He turns away from all the plate glass shattered and beyond repair. For all his history in science, for all his interest in science and history, Crawford is no 18th century intellect, confident that we've figured out everything that can be known. He writes, I believe there's more to this world than meets the casual eye. A whiff of wood smoke and the closing of a door. I don't know all that's happening here. He takes nothing for granted. Even the beloved patterns of nature fail to mollify his existential anxiety. To see rows of apple trees in bloom in a May too cold for bees terrifies him. We're fortunate that this poet of the serious mean is not altogether reasonable. As Goethe wrote, superstition is the poetry of life. Both sense the strangest connections between real, tangible elements. You have to wonder if Crawford is making fun of himself or of the rest of us when in his ballad about trying to start a generator during a power outage, he begs to be permitted to join the worthy in the hum of light. Wherever Bob Crawford may situate himself on the periphery of that circle, he brings to light things of inestimable worth. Bob, you take it from here. You out there, Bob?
I'm there, but it's so bright that I can't see my cursor. There you go.
All right, I'm going. Bye.
Okay. Did it come up?
You're all set, Bob.
I am not on the screen though. Well, why with me, of course, be.
I don't know if you get to see yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, then, that's okay. Okay. Well, just as a note, as anyone may have noticed, this is not a background behind me. This is the real thing, and it may have been a one of those ideas. It was a good idea at the time. I'm surrounded by wasps that are eager to build their nest, and they're chewing on the porch wood. So if I jump up, don't take it to be anything bad. There's a lot of wasps around here. Well, thank you, Alfred, for that amazing introduction. And thank you to the Newburyport Literary Festival for staging this event. And thank you, Susan, for that fine reading. In the written intro to this reading, Alfred says that I am a poet wary of destruction. And I took that to mean wary of entropy, or the second laws of thermodynamics, that nothing lasts, it all falls apart, or as Frost put it, nothing gold can stay. Well, as I looked through my poems, it was clear that I wasn't just wary of it, I was damn near frightened out of my mind by it. It is the reason to be afraid of the dark and for keeping the lights on. And I'm going to start with the poem Power Failure. Power failure. Groggy at first, you think a bulb's burnt out, but the clock is off, the hum is gone, an unfamiliar silence has returned. Maybe it's just your room, but there's no water. Maybe it's just the inn, but out the window, against the trees, the only light is the snow. The valley down to Littleton is dark, and so you wonder how far the failure goes. This town, a few towns over, or did it start beyond the notch, spread all the way from Boston? Because the silence seems so large, because it's late at night, you wonder if there might have been a great catastrophe that changed everything on the other side of the mountains. So that would be an ugly, selfish thought, standing there looking out the window and then feeling the cold creep through the watery glass. There is engaged a part of you. Admit it. They wouldn't mind the starting all over again. The desperate part of you that longs for winter and a covering of snow. And this next is more on power fairs. Alfred mentioned this in his introduction. And this is more on power fairs and things that don't work. It's called The Hum of Light. The power lines are down. We're in the dark, the victims of a wet cement-like snow. I'm pleading with my generator, spark. Its stubborn answer up to now is no. I'm clumsy with small engines and I'm slow. My neighbors naturally have done it right. Their generators thrum, their windows glow. They've joined the worthy in the hum of light. I'm reading in a flashlight's shaky arc the manual for this broken dynamo. All warnings with an exclamation mark. What does a chart called troubleshooting show? It won't turn over if the oil is low. Make sure the throttle cable clamp is tight. I lack the proper tools to be a pro and join the worthy in the hum of light. I pull and get a single futile bark. Improper gas to dry gas ratio? My options here are narrowing and stark. I'll have to ask my neighbor, whom I know so well enough to call John Doe, for help. Reveal that I'm a neophyte, a failure as a modern day Thoreau, to join the worthy in the hum of light. Prince of Darkness, let the power flow. Please let this old corrupted fuel ignite. Unstick this carburetor, let me go and join the worthy in the hum of light. And luckily, Alfred mentioned this also in the introduction. It's called Cold May. It is about an orchard down the street. Every year this time, they grow the most amazing peaches, and everyone is on pins and needles waiting to see if the blossoms can survive the frost. Or the frost is it's not too warm, and then it gets too cold. There's various things that go on. It is called Cold May. Too cold for bees, the apple trees in rows still bloom against the sky. They have to try, so I presume to call the bees, be fruitful trees. But I see doom. All this, no bees. The flowering trees, they terrify. And sometimes entropy, I just get mad at God for setting it up this way. So here's a poem called An Abandoned Garden. By August, I noticed the lack of care. And now in September, I feel the despair. The rusting tools, the vanished rose, reveal an all too brief affair. The hopeful beginning has come to a close as a meeting place for sinister crows and devious weeds, planning for when they'll make this a plot where anything goes. What kind of errant husbandman would let it fall to field again? I think I know. I've met a few. A fine egalitarian, the type of man a touch askew, who holds the universal view. To everything a heart be true, but saves desertion just for you. Yeah, it was. This poem is about imagining buying a burial plot. You don't do this. This is not real, but it is about a cemetery that's in East Derry, and the mountain that's mentioned, Uncanunic, is a mountain to the west of Manchester, New Hampshire, that you can see from the graveyard. Sales pitch. He walked with me around the grounds, expecting me to give away by how I sighed at this or shrugged at that, what I might spend today to buy a proper burial plot in his East Derry cemetery. We ended up out in the field where all the new graves were arranged in cul-de-sacs and perfect lines like fresh suburban subdivisions. I see you're no fan of the heat. The sun just pounds this open spot. For just a little more, I've got a space under those maple trees, the older ones along the lane. I saw what he was pointing at, admired how the narrow path wound crookedly along the cool edge of the woods. I thought of how there could be colors in the fall and how the big trees neatly framed the little view of Uncanunic I'd always have across the way, a sight a visitor might like. It really isn't that much more. There's only 1 or 2 plots left. I felt the sweat run down my brow, looked at the summer sky and knew whatever extra price I paid, I'd rest more comfortably in shade. We're moving on to the beach. This poem is called Beach Rental. Beach rental, Sunday. I bounce around from chair to chair, thrilled by the hammock on the porch, salt air. Monday, decision day. Beach books to choose, decide which shore-themed coffee mug to use. Tuesday, outside the beach umbrella shade. Time stretches out, ambitions are mislaid. Wednesday, watching a line of clear blue sky stall to the north, the clouds keep scudding by. Thursday, the rain, a dark and stormy, tall, my pile of books, I'll never read them all. Friday, my parents walk along the sand, slowly. My father holds my mother's hand. Saturday, all packed, there's nothing left to show that I was here. It's time for me to go. And this poem was written in a bar right, on St. Armand's Circle in Sarasota, Florida. And it actually it exists on a dollar bill that's tacked up there. I wonder if it still exists. I have to go back and check sometime. It's called Florida Retirees. So many stride beside the waves, you think it's exercise that saves. But I suspect there's something more that draws them here to walk the shore. I see the way they often pause in their pursuit of a lost cause, to watch a line of breakers stand and fall across the bright white sand. They're not completely taken in by dreams of being young and thin. They see the water try to stay, run down the beach and slip away. They've come with others of their age to move along this well-lit stage, acknowledging they're not alone on broken shells and powdered stone. Now, the next poem, this is the climate change, about the climate change, to beat all climate change, and it's entropy at its finest. I'm sure you're aware of the theory that the dinosaurs were wiped out by a giant asteroid that hit off the Yucatan Peninsula and wiped out most life on Earth, except a few furry things that ended up, furry things that burrowed in the ground that end up being us. This poem is called the KT Boundary. And that's after there's a line of iridium that's been of clay that's around the Earth. Everywhere you look at the same level, there's this layer of clay that this asteroid impact deposited across the globe. It's called the KT Boundary. On top of the food chain, they had few concerns. It was bathwater warm. There were plenty of ferns. A Cretaceous Isaiah could claim he divined that God in his wisdom had clearly designed a world without end for the dinosaur kind. Then out of the blue, it all changed for their lot. One day they were kings, and then they were not. All over the world, the great dinosaurs died. They starved, or they froze, or were suddenly fried. They found out the hard way the prophet had lied. Yet from the beginning, the end had been known, foretold in the orbit of one giant stone. It smashed into earth. Ash covered the land. What happened to T-Rex explained by the band, a line of iridium drawn in the sand. It circles and circles in this grand design, a ballet of masses, mostly benign, but sometimes the circles go bump in the night. So don't say I'm silly and switch off the light when I wake up feeling that something's not right. Okay. And I'm sure you're familiar with this story about Odysseus. It is way back from the 20 years at the front there around Troy, and how he got waylaid on an island by the Greek goddess Calypso, and then he made his way back home. And this poem imagines Calypso coming to Odysseus's home to explain herself to Penelope. And it's called Calypso Calls on Penelope. Did you buy that load of crap? The bit about the need to be a handyman, the touching speech on being home? Bullshit. I'm here to tell you why he really ran. He says he's back to fix what needs repair. Truth, dear, he couldn't keep up with the sex, outrageous games, immortal underwear, positions that required him to flex. Blah, blah, he made that bed, he wants to care. Fact is, he's slowing down. He's often tired. You've noticed that he's starting losing hair. How more and more he fails to get inspired. Penelope, honey, you ought to know, he didn't want to leave. I made him go. I guess that's an entropy of another kind. And, Alfred also mentioned this poem in the introduction. It's called A Passenger. And these are the next couple of poems. So how do we keep the lights on? How do we just deal with it? That idea of Frost's thing of poetry is stay against confusion. Well, how do we keep this stay against confusion? And this is one of them because it talks about acceptance or the living in the moment if it's possible. And it imagines a passenger on board. There was a ferry that was transporting heavy water for the Nazi nuclear weapons program across a lake in Norway. And the British Special Services in Norway, they put some explosives in the hull that were to go off at a certain point. No one knew it, of course, but the boat had passengers on it, so I can imagine a passenger on that boat. And it's called A Passenger. You do not know what lies within the hold. Calmly, you walk the deck while down below clocks tick toward their appointed hour. You go about your business, unaware of bold decisions, grand designs. Obey when told to show your papers. Soon plastique will blow apart the ferry's bow. You'll never know. You simply note the night has gotten cold. But if you knew what this trip held in store, would you still see the beauty of the moon? The rising haloed moon that just now broaches a mountain pass above the darkened shore and full, resplendent, sends a white harpoon across the water as your hour approaches. You can live in the moment. You also can respond to entropy fiercely. And this poem is about a woman who was holding a moving sail on the other side of the Green Mountains, headed down west into to Bennington, Vermont. I was going on Route 9, and I saw that she was holding this huge lawn sail on the side of the road. I didn't stop, but I wrote a poem about it, and it's called Moving Sail. She sat behind a folding table where the mountain shadow cut the lawn in two. I showed an interest in the furniture. I fiddled with a Tonka truck, thumbed through a paperback, and sure I sensed a deeper grief at the bottom of it all. I looked at her for confirmation. I wanted her to know that I could tell how difficult it was to sell a household full of things that meant much more than pennies on the dollar. I felt each Christmas morning in the toys. She simply stared right back, appraising me. If she understood, she didn't say. Her face refused to give a thing away. Hurry here. And this poem is about how I think I'm always in entropy is so universal. Everything seems horrible, but really what's amazing is when it's not when we defeat it, when we're able to do even the smallest of things that defeats entropy. And this is called the row of stones. In those December storms that start as rain but end as snow, I try to count the flakes as they begin to fall, but it's in vain. I lack the dedication that it takes to be a census taker of the snow. I'll be distracted as a snow squall breaks across the field by a long, gray, narrow row of stones, a wall within a stand of birch, 1,000 stones at least, pride grasped below, pulled up and piled. In this hard springtime work, the greatest effort spent to make the wall was lifting each the first inch off the earth. I know when things get high enough, they fall. I'm struck in wonder that they're raised at all. Like, since I can't see my screen, I'm seeing if Alfred's there or not. And then the last two poems are love poems, because really the thing that puts a lie to entropy is love. I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. French braids. While one hand is content to touch, admire a balanced, careful weave, preserved for viewing the beauty and the boundaries of desire, the other hand is busy at undoing. The quiet hand counsels restraint, afraid to wreck the composition of composure. It's wary of destruction just for fun. The other wants to slip between each braid, to tease apart the strands, let run, spill over, release, unbind what was so neatly done. Your urgent kiss decides which hand is played. A gentle pull brings argument to closure. Surprised, my hands attempt to catch your hair. It falls the way the rain lets go the air. And let me see. Yeah, I'll just close this one. This is what matters here. In atoms, 99.9% nothing at all. The world's an empty place. Its solid shapes are objects we invent to give a form to nuclei in space. But these constructions aren't exactly fake. It hurts when, as a test, we kick a stone. Electrons charge across the void and make illusions hard enough to break a bone. Outside the window, photons waver, glow, collapsing to what matters here. Your bright blue scarf, dark hair, a body that I know is not a trick of late November light. You and I, more than a thought, thin air, unique arrangements of what isn't there. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Susan. Terrific readings. Have a safe trip back to faraway Amsterdam, Susan. And Bob, I'll see you at the Peddler's Daughter soon.
Soon, yes, sir.
So many of our poems get their first readings, but they're not very good poems at that point. No. You guys were terrific. Oh, if you want to hang out for another 5 minutes, we can ask people if they want to.
Sure, I kind of sure I didn't realize. I didn't know what time it was. It's hard to see.
Try it. We'll say if anyone wants to ask a question of these two wonderful poets, go ahead. Put it. Well, I'll ask you a question, Susan. How deep are you into your newest collection?
Ooh, that's difficult to say. I had a little bit of a hiatus, and now I'm writing a lot of new poems, so it's hard to say. But yeah, I'm definitely I'm definitely en route.
And when you did publish, did you get that? Did it act as a kind of a writing block for a moment just to have the book out there?
No, I don't think the book per se. I think actually it was, you know, it was kind of liberating to have them in a book and put them out into the world.
Oh yes, and it's a lovely book, and it's really is making its way in the world quite nicely. But I always feel as though when I put one out there, it's hard to get started up again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You've had
Well,
that.
that's also why these communities are you know, are so important to us.
Yes, right. We are so blessed here in this community.
Yeah, very, very enviable community.
So it's on display today because we had Deborah is this year's was this year's honoree of the festival, and we've seen, and then we of course every year we start with the powwows who've published new books, and then since then we've had Midge and we've had Bob, Rena.
And I really hope to attend in person. You know, that was one of the, you know, one of the problems with the COVID year. But I would encourage everybody to attend the Frost Farm conference, you know, which is just a wonderful conference, that writing conference that Bob runs.
I'm soon to have a great announcement about that, but I haven't quite nailed down all the details, but it looks promising.
Well, it's just a fantastic experience, you know, to go there. I strongly urge it. If you have writer's block going there, you won't have writer's block by the time you leave.
That's where I met you.
That's right. That's right. It was a wonderful time.
Well, as people are saying, no questions, but lots of applause.
Oh, that's so nice.
Lots of applause.
Yeah, really, it's just fantastic. Thank you, Alfred.
I'm going to end the program now and wish everyone good luck. And I have to, I hope that you'll stick around. Our day is far from over. We have coming up next, we have the poetry of Martha Collins and Ernest Hilbert, whom you saw interviewing Deborah last night. And we keep on going right up until our last program is at 7 o'clock this evening. And that is, I want to make a pitch for that selfishly, because that's Rena and I, we recorded a Melopea and we're very, very proud of that. I can't wait for you to see it. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, Susan.
Bye.